I would say we just need to get back to the basics and tighten some things up. Like anything, we've been at it so long, it started to get a little loose. We provided lots of formal training in the beginning, and as new people folded into the family, they didn't necessarily get all that formal training. And much like you guys yesterday said, over half of you said, I've come from a district that was a PLC district, or I've been part of a professional learning community. And I would put money that probably looked different depending on where you taught. The expectations were different, the way it came together was different. So here's one of the ways that you can help me. We have gotten very loose on the way we use the term PLC. And you will find in your buildings, I can promise you, that when your teachers talk about their weekly team meetings, they're going to call it their PLC meeting. And Solution Tree is kind of the guru of PLCs. And what they would tell you is that your school is a PLC and your district is a PLC. It's the big community. And that when you're talking about your 2, 5, 7, 10-person team that meets weekly, that's the collaborative team within a PLC. So if you kind of think of it like your family, your house, you're a family that lives in the community. We have teams in our schools that are part of a big PLC. Does that make sense? And so I can promise you that when you use it that way, you'll be one of the few people that's right. But every time you hear it, it'll be like a little check mark that I knew something you didn't know. I got that one right. And I'm working to correct myself, so you'll hear me correcting myself. There is a piece of, so that you have a table tub in front of you. We'll use that in a little bit. If you want to put that off to the side to give you some room, feel free. Before you put that on the floor, though, grab the box of markers out of it. And then you should have a piece of chart paper at the end of your table. I'm going to ask you to throw the chart paper in the middle of your table, or let me give you all the directions before you start moving, since there's so many of you. If you would rather pop a squat on the floor somewhere or throw it up on the wall, it's sticky, you're welcome to do that. I know that the table space is a hot commodity. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to jot down, brainstorm, graffiti. What do you know about professional learning communities? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What have been your experiences? What are the good things that come out of it? Anything that comes to mind when you think about professional learning communities. Make sense? All right, go. Of course you're not. It would be awesome if you were at tables of 6, but figure it out. So no more than 3 in a pair. It might be best if you worked with the person across from you. And here's what I'd like you to do. So at this table here, these 2 ladies are going to look at the first quote, these ladies are going to look at the second quote, and these ladies are going to look at the third quote. And I want you to pull out the important parts. It's not really a quote, it's more of a statement. But I want you to pull out the important parts. Once you've kind of dissected your statement, I want you to have a conversation with your table about what did you think were the most important parts of yours. Make sense? All right. So decide who you're working with, and let's do this in about 3 minutes. In a true professional learning community, it should be this ongoing work that's kind of cyclical. Those 4 questions that you focus on, you're starting with question 1, moving to 2, 3, 4, and then you're starting back with 1. It's that collaborative approach. So if I have a student in my classroom that I'm struggling with, I should be trying everything I can, and eventually I'm going to run out of ideas. I need to bring that student to my team, have a conversation. Here are some work samples. Here are the things that I've tried. I keep hitting a roadblock. What you guys got for me? 30 seconds of let me tell you what I know. Not 2 hours of here's the whole history of this child since birth, but here's what you need to know. That my team is going to give me some ideas, and then we talk about that action research. I'm going to go back, I'm going to try out those things, and I'm going to come back to my team in a few weeks and let them know, hey, I tried those things, this worked, this didn't work. It's that never-ending cycle. It's all of our kids. It's our high-achieving students and our struggling students. If you're not learning something new because you're part of your collaborative team, then something's not right with your team. If you are going to your meeting on a weekly basis because it's an obligation and you don't feel like that was a good hour of my time, I am glad I did that. I've been part of many teams over my time, and I leave feeling like, oh, it was an hour of my life I'm never going to get back. We were doing it wrong. There was something not working in our team. And so if that is you, if you find that you've been fortunate enough to be placed with a team that's got a little work to do, just know that you're doing it right when you leave thinking my kids are better because I just sat in there with that team for the last hour. That's how you'll know things are working right. It should be very evidence-based. If you're not looking at data pretty much every team meeting, that would be a sign that we've got some work to do. It could be informal formative assessment data. Here's an index card, and my kids solve this problem on their way out the door. Here's who's got it. Here's who doesn't have it. Let's talk. It could be here's some work samples from what we've been doing in class this week. But that should be kind of a regular part of your practice. So you have in your table tubs a packet, and it looks like this. It looks like an article. If you would pull that out and flip to the last page, you'll see the district PLC expectations. So let me tell you while you're passing those out where this came from. You're flipping to the very last page, which should be the district PLC expectations. It might be like the back cover, actually. Just flip it over. We had a PLC steering committee a handful of years ago. It was teachers, it was administrators, it was district office, it was FHEA, it was a little bit of everybody. And these apply to everyone. It doesn't matter if you are an art teacher, if you are a resource teacher, if you are a library media specialist, if you're a literacy coach, if you're an SLP, every teacher in our district, every certified staff member is expected to be a participating member of some form of collaborative team. Some of those teams are easy to figure out. I'm a second grade teacher, so I'm part of the second grade team, and some are a little trickier. You could be part of a district PLC, and we'll talk more later about how you'll know about that. So let me talk you through some of these. All means all. Every teacher should be part of a team, and every teacher should be meeting in their team on pretty much a weekly basis. There's a few exceptions, but if you're at the secondary level, you have early release Wednesdays, and you have your meetings every Wednesday. When the kids leave, that's your hour to have your meetings. If you're at the elementary level, you'll have your meetings once a week during plan time. One of those is dedicated to your PLC meetings, your team meetings. Teams are expected to have an agenda each week, and that agenda should follow those 4 questions. So what do we want our kids to know? How are we going to know when they get it? What are we going to do if they don't get it? And what are we going to do if they come to us already knowing it, or if they figure it out right away? So that intervention extension piece. And then teams are also expected to develop some norms. Here's what I can tell you about norms. You will find some teams that are checking a box, and you'll find norms that say things like, we're going to start and stop on time. We're going to meet weekly. We're going to have snacks. And I would say that you're probably going to do those things whether it's a norm or not. Like, we're going to stop on time. That's a good plan because the kids are coming back. So I'm hoping you're about to wrap up. When we talk about true PLC norms, true team norms, what we're really looking for is what are those working together agreements? And so if you know in your team you have a very dominant person who's just going to take over and kind of railroad every conversation, why don't you just tell us what you'd like to do, because in the end we all know that's what's going to happen. Have you ever worked with someone like that? Then your team needs a norm about how are you going to have equal voice at the table. And you have to be willing to hold each other accountable to the norm, or don't bother setting it. It's just some words on a piece of paper. If your team has a hard time making decisions, have you ever been a team like that? Like, for the love, would somebody just make the call? Then you need to have a process that you're going to use. We're going to talk about something for a few minutes, and then we're going to do a fist of 5 and make a decision. If you feel like we're all over the place, some people are very innovative in their thinking, and some people are not so innovative in their thinking, and so we have a hard time coming to consensus, then what's your norm for how you're going to come to consensus? That's what your norm should look like. In true reality, your team should have a conversation at the beginning of the year that sounds something like, so what are the things we struggled with last year? What were the things that kept us from being perfect? What were the things that kept us from feeling like, man, it was the best hour of my week? Those are the things that we need to set some norms around. You know, very rarely did we look at student data. That's something we need to get better at. Or I don't think I once brought a work sample and put it on the table and said, what would you guys do with this guy? Or we looked at some data, and we looked at it, 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 and we sliced and that way, and never really did we get to, and what are we going to do as a result of that next week? We talked a lot about next year when we teach this unit, but what did we do to help the kids that were sitting in front of us? We never got to that part of the conversation. So we're going to use a data analysis protocol this year, and we're going to make sure that looking at the data is a very quick amount of time, and so now what do we do now? That's what we're going to spend all of our time on. Those are the types of norms that we want to see your team setting. And then meeting weekly. It's an expectation that you meet on those days that you're scheduled to have team meetings. And that's really very rarely an issue. I would say that's only a concern with a few of those teams that meet virtually on a weekly basis. So if I am a drama teacher at the middle school. I'm probably the only teacher in my building that teaches that course. And so I don't fit cleanly with another team in my building. So you're part of a district team. So all of the middle school drama teachers have their own collaborative team, and they meet weekly virtually through Skype or through Google Hangout. Most use Skype, some have morphed into other things. Some of our gifted teachers at the different levels, there's only one of them in the building, and so they meet virtually. And so you can probably guess if you're the only, like an AP Stats teacher at a high school, you're probably the only one teaching AP Stats. And so sometimes you might meet with your math department, and then there's other times where the AP Stats teachers, they've kind of designated some weeks to meet. If you're not sure, especially at the secondary level, if you're part of a virtual PLC or not, let me know. We have a Google Doc that lists them all out, who's part of it from every building and who's the point of contact for each of those, who's the teacher contact and who's the principal contact. And I'm happy to share that with you if you have questions about that. Just shoot me an email and I'll send you the link. Another district expectation is that you take the needs assessment. So for those of you who have experience with PLC, do you remember the critical issues, the 18 critical issues? Have any of you done that? It's like on a scale of 1 to 7, how well do we do this? And there's maybe 20 statements. Okay, well, you're making me really nervous. I'm like, what kind of PLCs have you been part of? So that's a pretty regular part of a true PLC. They would do that a couple times a year. And we used to give that for a while, and we've morphed a little bit and adjusted it. And so the needs assessment is something that everyone will take second quarter. It'll be through an email link. You'll take it individually. I'm going to ask you to be honest when you take it, and it'll be anonymous. And so that data all comes back to me, and we'll go through and well, really it's Jenny does all that, but we'll go through and disaggregate all that. And then we'll send the report back to your principal, who will send this report for your team back to your department chair or your PLC leader if you're a district PLC. And it'll just have averages. So for question 2, what are the levels of trust in our team? 3 people gave it a 3, somebody gave it a 4, and 5 people gave it a 5. That'd be a really big PLC team. And the idea is that you then spend 15 minutes talking about, okay, so let's look at these results. What are we doing great at? What are we not so hot at? And what is it that we need to work on this coming quarter? There's an expectation that you set SMART goals. Mary talked yesterday that those SMART goals should be centered around the priority standards from your curriculum. And so what's the one thing that our kids have got to get this quarter? And a lot of our time and energy during our meetings is going to be focused on that. That's what we're going to be using as our common assessments. That's what the work samples that we talk to, the data that we look at, it's all going to be centered around our SMART goals, which should be linked to those priority standards. And then the curriculum, obviously, that should be the main document that we're using. We focus a lot on rigor. And one of the things that we'll talk about with Dr. Greiner later today is if I am, a third grade teacher, kids learn multiplication in third grade. They spend a lot of time on it, not necessarily learn it. And just because I walk in a third grade classroom and I see some multiplication happening, I'm not going to check the box that says curriculum, check. What are we doing with it? If we're just doing flashcards, I'm going to guess that that's probably not the rigor level that's in the curriculum. And so it's not just that you're, to Mary's point yesterday, teaching the apple unit, but what are you doing with the apples, and is that at the right rigor level? And so when we talk about curriculum, it's not that you're on topic, it's that you're at the right level within the topic. And then we'll talk some about assessments. And so formative assessments should be informing your instruction along the way, as opposed to those summative assessments that are kind of that map test, ACT, end of the road, how did they do? I'm not really going to do anything about it. And the expectation is that you're giving multiple common formatives every semester, and that you're giving one summative every semester. That is the bare minimum. I would say that very few teams are doing the bare minimum. If anything, you're going to be telling me, oh, we got assessments down. If we could do a little fewer of those, that would be great. Those assessments that you're talking about at your collaborative meetings should be based on the priority standards, and those are the assessments that you should be disaggregating. You will give lots of other assessments to inform your instruction and not necessarily bring those to your team. If you find your team is overwhelmed with data, you could be the bright spot in the room and say, what if we just look at data around priority standards and let's try to manage it a little bit better? That will help your team not feel so overwhelmed. And then we'll talk some this afternoon about the instructional planning framework. Mary alluded to the years that we have spent talking about instructional strategies. And the expectation is that at least once a month, you're spending time in your team meetings talking about those instructional strategies. And it should be very real life, very practical and helpful. So it might sound like I have been stuck in a lecture rut because I have so much content to cover and my kids are not engaging the way I want them to. So what strategies could we be using to help them better engage? Or my kids are compliant right now and I'm not sure they're thinking very deeply about the curriculum. And let me tell you, it's some good stuff that I'm teaching. It's them, not me. What can I do? And we're gonna talk about some strategies. Those are the types of conversations that we want you having at your meetings. All right, so those are the district expectations on the back of that page. There's a little more detail in there if you want to skim through that. The last thing that I'm going to ask you to do, and I'm not going to give you a lot of time. So in your article, if you flip back to the front of the packet, there's an overview, and there's big idea 1, big idea 2, big idea 3. I'm going to ask you to get into groups of 4. Somebody read the overview, somebody read idea 1, idea 2, somebody read idea 3, and then I just want you to kind of retell the part that you read to the rest of the group, like a quick jigsaw. Some of you will have to work with someone, not at your table. It'll be okay, I promise. All right? So find a group of 4, stop and jot as you work. When you finish, here's the last part. So the first part is read your section. The second part is tell the rest of your team what you read. The third part is I want you to go back to your poster and I want you to add to it. After I jogged your memory about PLC, after you read the article, what did you forget to put on your poster that you want to add to it at this point? Make sense? I'm going to give you about 8 minutes to do all 3 of those parts. Most of you said that you had some experience with professional learning communities. If you didn't, we'll pretend that you did. So based on your experience and what we just talked about, a 5 is put me on any collaborative team and I'll show them what to do. A 1 is, dear God, what were those letters again? So where do you fall on the scale of 1 to 5? Just show me how are you feeling right now about the idea of being part of a professional learning community and understanding the true work that a team should be doing on a weekly basis. Okay. Okay, all right, perfect. 3 3/4. All right, here's the last thing I'm gonna ask you to do before you move to a break. It's one of my favorite things to do with my kids in the middle of a class when I feel like I'm up here spouting brilliance and you've got this glassy-eyed look. What is happening right now? Magic 11, any of you do this? Yeah, okay, so think rock, paper, scissors, shoot. So you'll stand in a group. They can be any size group you want. It just has to be a group smaller than, I don't know, really whatever number you give them, but I usually tell them a group smaller than 5. So for you, I don't really care, your table group would probably work. You're gonna go 1, 2, 3, shoot. You're gonna throw a number out. It could be a 0, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a no talking activity. If you're talking, you're cheating. Got it? No cheaters. You'll throw a number out and your job is to add the numbers of your team and you want to get to 11 without strategizing. Well, without talking. I'm not going to say you can't strategize, but you can't talk. Make sense? So rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Whatever number you throw out, you have to add to 11. Once you hit 11, you can take your break. Okay? If you are, let me tell you this before you leave. If you're a guidance counselor, Rhonda will meet you in the foyer. So grab all your stuff. You won't be coming back here today. And if you're a library media specialist, you'll meet your Andrea out in the hallway as well. Grab all your stuff. All right? You got to stand when you do it.